The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Trust me. I know. I have been studying humor across 17 sentient species for nearly 30 cycles, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is funnier than the cosmic joke that was first contact with humans. Ambassador Telora, please remain calm, said Grand Counselor Vex, as he paced across the observation deck, his forearms twitching nervously. His purple skin had taken on that particular shade of lavender that indicated extreme stress among the Centauri. The human delegation will arrive in exactly 9 minutes. I snorted.
Actually snorted.
Very unprofessional for the Galactic Union's leading xenoanthropologist. But sometimes you just have to express your feelings through your respiratory system. Calm? You want me to be calm? After what happened on Proxima Station, these humans slaughtered an entire Drekken battle fleet because of a misunderstanding about their reproductive customs. Vex stopped pacing and all 6 of his eyes blinked simultaneously. That was an unfortunate diplomatic incident. Unfortunate diplomatic incident? Is that what we are calling it? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. The Drekken admiral asked if human females were for sale, and within 6 hours, the humans had reduced their flagship to cosmic dust. That's not an incident. That's a declaration of their nature. The observation deck fell silent as we both stared out at the endless sea of stars. Somewhere out there, a species that had barely discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago was rewriting the power dynamics of a galactic community that had existed in relative peace for millennia. What do the humans call it? Vex asked suddenly. That thing they do with their mouth when they are amused? Smiling, I replied. Though sometimes they call it grinning when it's particularly predatory. Yes, grinning. The diplomatic footage shows their captain was grinning when he vaporized the Drekken vessel. Vex's voice had taken on that scholarly tone he used when trying to understand something deeply unsettling. Curious behavior for a species engaged in violence. I turned away from the viewport, my tentacles curling in frustration. That's because you fundamentally misunderstand humans, Counselor. They don't separate their emotions neatly like we do. They feel fear and excitement simultaneously. They laugh in the face of danger. They smile when they are about to destroy you. It's all mixed up together. The ship's AI chimed softly, interrupting my impromptu lecture. Human vessel approaching, disaggregation HSS, Defiance. Request for docking clearance received. Vex straightened his ceremonial robes. Grant clearance and prepare the welcome delegation. You realize, I said as we walked toward the docking bay, that the name of their ship alone should tell you everything you need to know about them. They named their flagship Defiance, not cooperation, not peace. Defiance. Vex made a dismissive gesture with his lower right hand. Many species choose aggressive nomenclature for their military vessels. The Thraxi name their ships after venomous creatures. Yes. But the Thraxi haven't obliterated 3 separate aggressor fleets in less than a decade of joining the galactic community, I countered. The humans, the corridors of our diplomatic vessel, the enlightened path were filling with various representatives of the council races, tall, willowy Alari with their luminous skin, bulky Gorvan warriors with their ceremonial battle scars, even a contingent of the rarely seen Noctis, their dark matter bodies barely visible except as distortions in the light. All come to see the newest, most dangerous species in the galaxy. Docking procedure complete, announced the ship's AI, human delegation preparing to board. I felt my primary heart quicken its pace. Despite all my research, despite all the footage I'd analyzed, I had never actually met a human in person. Few had. They rarely left their expanding territory these days, preferring to let their growing reputation do the diplomatic heavy lifting. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and there they were, humans. The first thing that struck me was how ordinary they looked. Bipedal, symmetrical, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. Standard template for about 40% of sentient species, but then you noticed the details. The way they moved, fluid but powerful, like predators pretending to be prey, the strange intensity of their gaze, the complete lack of obvious defensive or offensive biological adaptations. No claws, no significant teeth, no armor, no venom. They were, by all objective measures, completely unremarkable physically. And yet, the lead human stepped forward, female, I guessed, based on my research. shorter than the others with what humans called red hair, though to my eyes it appeared more like the color of cooling magma. Ambassador Janet Parker of Earth, she announced, looking directly at Vex without a hint of deference. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Her voice was melodious but firm, and she smiled, that famous human expression showing her teeth in what my research indicated was meant to be friendly, but which every instinct in my body read as threatening. Grand Counselor Vex of the Zentari, Vex replied, performing the traditional six-armed greeting gesture. And this is Ambassador Talora, our foremost expert on your species. The human turned those intense eyes on me. They were green, like the copper-based blood of the Aelari. An expert on humans, I'm flattered and a bit concerned. She laughed, another uniquely human trait, using vocalization to express amusement. What horrible secrets have you discovered about us? I felt my tentacles twitch involuntarily. Was she making a joke? Was she genuinely curious? Was it a threat? With humans it was impossible to tell. I specialize in behavioral xenoanthropology, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I study how different species interact with the galactic community. Your species has presented some unique case studies. I bet we have, she replied. And there was that smile again. The delegation moved from the airlock into the grand reception hall, where representatives from 27 species waited with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. The 5 humans, Parker, 2 other diplomats, and 2 individuals in what my research identified as military uniform moved through the crowd with casual confidence that bordered on arrogance. Ambassador Parker, called out Zero, the Thraxi envoy, his mandibles clicking excitedly. Is it true that humans deliberately expose themselves to toxins for recreational purposes? Parker laughed again. You mean alcohol? Yes, though I wouldn't call it a toxin exactly. But it is a neurotoxin, insisted Zedrel. And you consume it voluntarily? For pleasure? For pleasure? For social bonding? For religious ceremonies? For courage? Said one of the military humans, a tall male with dark skin. Speaking of which, do you serve drinks at these diplomatic functions? It helps us negotiate more creatively. There was a moment of shocked silence, followed by a ripple of translator devices attempting to confirm they had interpreted correctly. Consuming mind-altering substances during critical diplomatic negotiations, unthinkable. Commander Lowe, Parker said with a gentle rebuke in her voice, I think we can manage without chemical assistance today. Just trying to lighten the mood, Ambassador, he replied with a shrug. Everyone looked so tense. Perhaps, I suggested, that's because the last 3 species who engaged in significant conflict with humanity are now either extinct or reduced to pre-industrial civilization. The room went silent. I immediately regretted my words. Direct confrontation was not the Galactic Union way, especially not at a welcome reception, but something about these humans made my professional detachment slip. Parker's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed slightly. An unfortunate series of misunderstandings. We came in peace each time. Yet peace was not the outcome, I countered. Peace was always an option, said Commander Lowe, his voice suddenly devoid of its earlier humor. Just not at any cost. An uncomfortable silence fell over the reception. Vex, ever the diplomat, quickly steered the conversation towards safer topics: cultural exchange programs, trade opportunities, shared scientific research. But I couldn't focus on the pleasantries. I kept watching the humans, especially Commander Lowe. There was something in his eyes, something I had seen in the historical footage from the conflicts with the Draken and the Krithak. A willingness, no, an eagerness to escalate beyond all rational proportion. Humans didn't just fight to win, they fought to ensure their enemies would never consider fighting them again. As the reception continued, I drifted to the edges of the gathering, observing. The humans had separated, mingling with different groups. Parker was engaged in animated conversation with the Ilari delegation. The 2 human diplomats were charming the representatives from the mercantile worlds, and Commander Lowe and his military colleague were, predictably, talking with the Gorvan warriors. I moved closer to that last group, adjusting my translator to better pick up their conversation. So your species has how many wars in its history? Asked Grek, the Gorvan captain, his voice containing unmistakable respect. We stopped counting, Lowe replied with a casual wave of his hand. Thousands. Probably. We fought ourselves more than anyone else until we met you folks. And in these wars, Grak continued, leaning forward eagerly, you used atomic weapons. Twice in actual war, Lowe said. Then we decided they were too destructive and banned them, for a while at least. Banned your most effective weapons? Another Gorvan sounded confused. Why would you limit your military capability? Lowe exchanged a look with his colleague that I couldn't interpret. Let's just say there are lines even humans hesitate to cross. Some weapons are too indiscriminate. The female military human spoke up then. We prefer precision, maximum effect with minimal collateral damage. Like your response to the Krothak incursion into your colony space, said Grak, mandibles spread wide in what passed for a Gorvan smile. Very precise, very effective. Both human military officers' expressions changed subtly. We don't typically discuss that incident, said Lowe, his voice flat. I couldn't help myself. I moved closer. Why not? It's widely known what happened. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me, 2 human, 3 Gorvan. Ambassador Talora, Lowe acknowledged me with a slight nod. I didn't realize you were interested in military history. I'm interested in understanding why humanity responds with such disproportionate force to what other species would consider minor provocations. I said, the Krothak seized one small mining outpost with 17 human casualties. Your response was to deploy a weapon that rendered their home planet uninhabitable. There was that look again, that strange intensity that made my primary heart flutter with primitive fear. They took 17 lives, said the female officer quietly, but more importantly, they took 7 children. Still, I pressed. The response, interrupted Lowe, was measured and appropriate by our standards. The Krothak were given multiple opportunities to return our people and withdraw. They chose to execute the children as a demonstration of their resolve. We demonstrated ours. The Gorvans were nodding appreciatively, their warrior culture finding kinship with this human brutality. I, however, felt sick. You call planetary devastation appropriate. We call it a message, said the female officer. Her name tag read Padal. Don't take our children. And the message has been received throughout this sector of the galaxy, added Grek with admiration. No species with functioning intelligence would attack a human settlement now. I wanted to argue further, but at that moment the ship's AI chimed again. Incoming transmission from Galactic Union Headquarters, Priority Alpha. Vex immediately called for attention. Excuse me, honored delegates. I must take this communication. Please continue enjoying the reception. He stepped away to a private communication node while the mingling resumed. I noticed that Ambassador Parker was watching Vex with unusual intensity, as if she could hear the private communication from across the room. When Vex returned, his lavender stress coloration had deepened to almost violet. He beckoned to me urgently. What is it? I asked when I reached him. The Krejak Hive has launched an assault on Outpost 227, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My tentacles went rigid with shock. But that— Yes, a human research station. Early reports indicate total destruction. No survivors. I felt suddenly cold. How many humans were at the outpost? 312. For a moment I couldn't speak. The Krejak were ancient enemies of the Galactic Union, savage, hive-minded insectoids who existed beyond the borders of civilized space. We had maintained an uneasy truce with them for centuries, neither side seeking direct confrontation. And now they had attacked a human outpost. Do the humans know? I asked. Not yet. I am obligated to inform them immediately. Vex, I said, gripping his lower arm with my tentacle, you must understand what this means. The Krejak have just signed their extinction warrant. Surely not, Vex replied, though his coloration betrayed his fear. The humans will respond proportionally. The Galactic Union will mediate. The humans don't do proportional, I hissed. Haven't you been paying attention? The Drekan insulted their females, and the humans destroyed their flagship. The Krothak killed 7 human children, and the humans made their planet uninhabitable. Now the Krothak have killed 300 humans. What do you think will happen? Before Vex could respond, Ambassador Parker appeared beside us, that unsettling smile still on her face. Is everything all right, Counselor? You seem distressed. Vex's color shifted rapidly as he struggled to maintain diplomatic composure. Ambassador Parker, I have just received troubling news that directly concerns Earth. May we speak privately? Her smile faded. replaced by something far more alarming: focus. Pure predatory focus. Of course. They moved to a private chamber adjacent to the reception hall. I followed, uninvited but unwilling to miss this historic moment. The moment when humanity would be unleashed upon the galaxy in all its terrible fury. Inside the chamber, Vex formally relayed the news. I watched Parker's face carefully, expecting shock, grief, rage, the normal emotional responses of sentient beings to mass casualty events. Instead, her expression became utterly terrifyingly calm. "I understand," she said when Vex finished. "Thank you for informing me promptly. I need to contact Earth immediately." "Of course," said Vex. "We will provide all assistance in coordinating a diplomatic response. The Galactic Union stands ready to mediate this unfortunate—" "Mediate," Parker interrupted, her voice still eerily calm. "I don't think you understand, Counselor. There will be no mediation. But surely dialogue is preferable to—" The time for dialogue ended when they attacked our research station. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You should withdraw any Union assets from the Kree-Jack territories immediately." After she left, Vex turned to me, his color now a sickly gray-purple.
What are they going to do?
I had studied human history extensively. I had analyzed their conflicts, their responses to threats, their concepts of justice and retribution. I knew exactly what they were going to do. "They are going to make an example of the Kree-Jack," I said softly, "and the galaxy will never be the same." Within hours, the human delegation had departed, their farewells polite but perfunctory. Ambassador Parker's final words to the assembled representatives were delivered with that same unsettling calm. "The Galactic Union has maintained peace through diplomacy and compromise for millennia. Humanity respects this achievement, but we must be clear: we will not compromise on the safety of our people. We did not come this far, reach for the stars, and spread across the void to kneel before threats. Anyone who mistakes our desire for peace as weakness will learn this lesson." As their ship, the Defiance, disengaged from our docking bay, I stood at the observation port watching it disappear into the darkness of space. "They are really going to do it, aren't they?" Vex asked, standing beside me. "Go to war with the Kree-Jack?" "War implies two sides fighting," I replied. "This won't be a war, it will be an extermination." "Surely not. The Kree-Jack controls 17 systems. They have thousands of hive ships. Even humans can't—" "You still don't understand them," I interrupted. "Humans don't assess threats based on logic. They react with emotion, and then they justify their emotional response with logic afterward. That makes no sense." "No, it doesn't. That's what makes them so dangerous." I turned to face him. "The Kree-Jack killed humans. Children, probably, among them. In the human mind, that justifies any response, no matter how extreme." Vex was silent for a long moment. "Will the Union support them? Officially? Would it matter? Humans don't seek permission or approval. They inform. They don't ask." Over the next 26 days, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented. The human response began with a formal declaration delivered simultaneously to the Galactic Union and to the borders of Kree-Jack space. Unconditional surrender within one standard day or face extinction. The Kree-Jack, predictably, responded with threats of their own. They had never surrendered in their 1,000-year history. They would not start now, especially not to a species barely out of its stellar cradle. I monitored the situation from Union headquarters, compiling data for what would certainly be the most important xenoanthropological study of my career, assuming the galaxy survived humanity's wrath. On the second day, human warships appeared at the borders of Kree-Jack space. Not the dozens we expected, but hundreds. Ships no one knew they had, emerging from hidden shipyards and secret bases throughout their territory. On the third day they struck, not at military targets or hive ships, but at the Kree-Jack food production worlds. 3 planets simultaneously hit with weapons that targeted specific genetic sequences, the genetic code of the Kree-Jack's primary food sources. Within hours, entire ecosystems began to collapse. "This is barbaric," Vex said as we watched the reports come in. "They are starving an entire species." "This is humanity," I replied. "They don't fight to defeat you today. They fight to ensure you can never threaten them again." By the 7th day, the Kree-Jack launched a desperate counterattack, sending their hive ships directly at human colonies. It was exactly what the humans had wanted. Their fleet, positioned in anticipation, decimated the Kreejak forces. No quarter asked, none given. On the 10th day, reports emerged of a new human weapon, a pathogen that specifically attacked the Kreejak neural network, the hive mind that connected their consciousness. Infected individuals became cut off from the collective, driven insane by their sudden isolation. They are not just killing them, Cyril observed with horror, they are destroying what makes them Kreejak. By the 15th day, the Kreejak sued for peace. The humans rejected it. The time for peace was before you attacked our people, was the official response from Earth. On the 26th day, it was over. The Kreejak civilization, a spacefaring power for 1,200 years, ceased to exist as a coherent entity. Their 17 systems were occupied by human forces. Their population was reduced to scattered, disconnected individuals. Their hive mind shattered beyond repair. And then, to the shock of the entire Galactic Union, the humans simply left. They took no territory. They claimed no resources. They established no colonies in former Kreejak space. I don't understand, Vex said, as we reviewed the final reports. What was the point? Why destroy them so completely and then just leave? I had been asking myself the same question. In all my studies of human behavior, this made no sense. Until suddenly, terribly, it did. Because it wasn't about the Kreejak, I said slowly. It was about everyone else. What do you mean? I gestured at the star map showing former Kreejak territory, now a power vacuum in the galactic political landscape. The Kreejak were the example. The message wasn't for them, it was for us. I felt my tentacles curl with dread. Humanity refused to kneel and made sure the galaxy understood exactly what that means. 1 week later, Ambassador Parker returned to Galactic Union headquarters. Alone, without military escort or diplomatic entourage, she requested a full assembly of all species representatives. The Grand Chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from 342 spacefaring civilizations gathered to hear what humanity had to say after their shocking demonstration of power. Parker stood on the central platform, small and unimposing physically, yet now radiating an authority that had nothing to do with size. The Galactic Union has stood for peace for millennia, she began. Earth respects this achievement and wishes to be part of this peaceful community. A murmur ran through the assembly. After what they had just done to the Kreejak, this seemed absurd. But peace cannot exist without clear boundaries, she continued. Humanity has drawn ours. We will not seek conflict. We will not expand aggressively. We will trade fairly, share knowledge openly, and contribute to the greater good of all sentient life. She paused, looking around the chamber, meeting the eyes, stalks, and sensory appendages of countless alien representatives. But know this, we will not kneel. We will not surrender our people to slaughter. We will not accept threats or coercion. Any aggression against humanity will be met with absolute force. There will be no second chances. There will be no proportional responses. There will only be consequences. The silence in the chamber was profound. The Kreejak chose to test our resolve. They no longer exist to regret that decision. Let their fate be a lesson to all. She stepped down from the platform and walked out of the chamber without another word. As the assembly erupted into chaotic discussion, I remained seated, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Humanity had just openly declared itself both a member of the peaceful Galactic Union and a species willing to commit genocide if provoked. And somehow they saw no contradiction in this. What happens now? Vex asked me, his color fluctuating between shades I couldn't even interpret. I looked at him, this political leader who had navigated the complex diplomacy of hundreds of species for decades, now completely adrift in the face of human paradox. Now the galaxy adapts to a new reality, I said, one where the rules that governed us for millennia no longer apply, one where a species barely out of its planetary adolescence has rewritten the fundamental equation of galactic power. And if they decide the Union itself is a threat? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The thought was too terrifying to contemplate. As I left the chamber, I passed a group of Ilari representatives, their luminous skin dimmed with concern. They are monsters, one whispered, savages with starships. No, I said, pausing beside them, that's what makes them so dangerous. They are not monsters. They are not savages. They are perfectly rational beings who will commit monstrous acts without hesitation if they believe it's justified. How can any species survive like that? Asked another Alairi. That's just it, I replied. They don't just survive, they thrive on conflict. They forge themselves in adversity. Every challenge makes them stronger, more determined, more united. I looked back at the empty platform where Ambassador Parker had stood. Humanity refused to kneel, and now I fear it's the galaxy that will learn to bow. Have you ever watched a predator after a kill? There's this moment of perfect stillness. The violence is over, the blood has been spilled, and the predator simply exists. Not celebrating, not gloating, just being in that quiet aftermath of destruction. That's what humanity was like after the Krejak extinction. Quiet, watchful, waiting. The rest of us? We were terrified. Ambassador Talora, please focus, Vex said, tapping his datapad impatiently. His color had stabilized in recent weeks, settling into a permanent lavender of chronic stress. The Galactic Security Council meeting begins in 20 minutes, and we need a unified position on the human question. I looked around the preparation chamber at the representatives of the Council's 12 permanent members, the most powerful, most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, all of them visibly uncomfortable with the topic at hand. There is no unified position possible, I replied, not bothering to hide my frustration. Half the Council wants to appease humanity at any cost. The other half wants to contain them before they become even more dangerous. Neither approach will work. We must find common ground, insisted Tekla, the Alari High Minister, her luminous skin pulsing with anxiety. The humans have requested membership on this very council. We cannot simply reject them without consequence. Nor can we accept them, thundered Grak of the Gorvin. They committed genocide without remorse. They violated every principle of proportional warfare. They did exactly what the Gorvin would have done, interrupted Zemerl of the Thraxi, mandibles clicking in agitation. Only more efficiently. Ubraik snarled but didn't deny it. I sighed, my tentacles curling in resignation. 3 months after humanity's display of power, and we were still arguing in circles. Meanwhile, human diplomatic and commercial envoys were spreading throughout Union space, establishing trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and most concerning military cooperation agreements with dozens of smaller powers. We are missing the point, I said. Arguing about whether to contain or appease humanity assumes we have the power to do either. We don't. Not anymore. The room fell silent. What do you suggest then, Ambassador? Asked Vex. We adapt. We learn to understand them. We find a way to coexist with a species that operates by fundamentally different rules than the rest of us. And if they decide we are a threat, asked Tekla, voicing the fear that haunted all of us. Then we become the next Krejak, I said bluntly. Unless we figure out what makes humans choose peace over war. The council chamber was a marvel of ancient engineering, a perfect acoustic sphere that allowed representatives from vastly different physiologies to hear and be heard without technological assistance. At the center stood the speaker's dais, today occupied by Grand Councilor Vex himself, a sign of the meeting's unprecedented importance. I sat in the observer section, my role advisory rather than voting. From this position I could see the entire assembly, and most importantly, I could watch the human delegation. There were 3 of them today. Ambassador Parker, now a figure of galaxy-wide notoriety, Commander Lowe, whose casual attitude seemed even more unsettling after what his species had done, and a new figure, an older human male with what my research identified as gray hair, though it appeared more silver-white to my eyes. The Security Council recognizes Ambassador Janet Parker of Earth, announced Vex, his voice steady despite his coloration. Parker approached the central dais, her posture relaxed yet commanding. Esteemed representatives, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. 3 months ago, humanity demonstrated our response to unprovoked aggression. Today, I come with an open hand rather than a closed fist. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. Earth formally requests membership on the Galactic Security Council. We believe our perspective would be valuable in maintaining peace and stability throughout Union space. The chamber remained silent. No murmurs of discussion. No clicking of communication devices. Just silence. Additionally, she continued, seemingly unperturbed by the chilly reception, we propose a mutual defense pact between Earth and the Galactic Union. Any attack on Union worlds would be considered an attack on humanity, requiring our full military response. Now the murmurs started. The implications were staggering. Human military protection would certainly deter external threats. The Union had struggled for centuries with raiders and pirates from beyond the border regions, problems that would likely vanish overnight if human warships were patrolling those sectors. But the cost was submission to human power. Tekla Viellery was the first to respond. Ambassador Parker, while we appreciate the generous offer of protection, many in the Union are concerned about humanity's approach to conflict resolution. The complete destruction of the Krejak civilization has raised questions about proportionality and restraint. Parker's expression didn't change. The Krejak killed over 300 of our people, children among them. They received exactly one warning. They chose their fate. But total extermination, Tekla began, was the only option that guaranteed they would never threaten another species again. Parker completed the thought. We eliminated a predator that has been harassing your borders for centuries. You are welcome. The audacity of it struck me like a physical blow. She was acting as if the genocide of an entire civilization was a favor. The Galactic Union has survived for thousands of years without resorting to species-wide extermination, said Zirel of the Thraxi. We have protocols, proportional responses, diplomatic channels, and how effective have those been against the Krejak? Interrupted the older human male, speaking for the first time. His voice was deeper, rougher than Parker's. How many Union worlds have they raided in the last century? How many citizens how many settlements destroyed while you debated the proper proportional response? Zirel's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. And you are? Admiral Thomas Reeves, Earth Defense Force, the human replied. I commanded the campaign against the Krejak. A ripple of tension passed through the chamber. This was the architect of genocide, standing calmly before the council, defending his actions as if they were reasonable. Admiral, said Greg of the Gorvan, leaning forward with obvious interest, your tactics were impressive, but unnecessary. Targeted strikes against their leadership castes would have achieved submission without total eradication. Reeves shook his head. You are applying your understanding of warfare to a species with a fundamentally different psychology. The Krejak hive mind meant they would never truly surrender as long as enough of them existed to rebuild. Their attacks would have continued indefinitely, just with longer intervals between them. So you decided for the entire galaxy that they had no right to exist? Asked Tekla, her skin flashing with indignation. They decided that when they attacked human civilians, replied Reeves, his voice still unnervingly calm, we simply carried out the sentence. The debate continued for hours. Questions about human military capabilities deflected, concerns about their decision-making process dismissed as irrelevant, requests for limitations on their future actions politely but firmly refused. Through it all, I watched Commander Lowe, who had remained silent during the entire exchange. Unlike Parker and Reeves, who engaged with the Council's concerns, Lowe seemed almost bored. He examined the architecture, studied the other delegates, occasionally made notes on his datapad. Only once did he show genuine interest, when a representative asked about human plans for the now empty Krejak territories. We have no intention of colonizing former Krejak space, Parker had replied. Those systems are now open for Union expansion under standard protocols. Lowe had smiled then, that unsettling human expression, not with joy or amusement, but with satisfaction, as if something had gone exactly according to plan. As the session finally concluded without resolution, the Council would need time to deliberate on humanity's requests. I made my way toward the human delegation. My position as xenoanthropologist gave me the perfect excuse to engage with them directly. Admiral Reeves, I called out as they were leaving the chamber. May I have a moment of your time? The three humans turned to face me. Parker with her diplomatic smile, Reeves with neutral courtesy, and Lowe with that same unnerving interest I'd noted during our first meeting. Ambassador Talora, Parker greeted me. The Union's expert on humanity. How may we help you? I have questions about your species' decision-making process, I said directly, specifically regarding the Krejak response. I'm trying to understand the calculus that led to extinction rather than defeat. Reeves studied me for a moment. It's quite simple, Ambassador. When we are attacked, we respond with overwhelming force to ensure it never happens again. But why extinction? I pressed. The Krivak were defeated militarily within days. Their capacity to threaten anyone was eliminated. Why continue to their complete destruction? Because they would have rebuilt, said Lo, speaking for the first time. They would have nursed their hatred, planned their revenge, and attacked again once they thought they had the advantage. We don't fight wars to win battles, Ambassador. We fight to end threats permanently. But surely there's a middle ground between victory and genocide, I argued. Parker's expression softened slightly. Ambassador to Laura, I understand this is difficult for Union species to comprehend. You have spent millennia developing systems of limited warfare and proportional response. It's admirable, truly, but it only works when all parties agree to those limitations. The Krivak agreed to those limitations, I countered. They have been bound by Union warfare protocols for 700 years, and yet they violated those protocols to attack our research station, said Reeves. Once they chose to step outside the rules, we responded outside the rules. With respect, Admiral, that's barbaric logic, I said. My professional detachment slipping. If everyone responded to rule-breaking by abandoning all rules themselves, civilization would collapse. Loie laughed, that strange human vocalization of amusement. You still don't understand us at all, do you? Despite being the so-called expert. Commander, Parker said in a warning tone. No, it's fine, Lo continued. Let me explain it simply, Ambassador. Humans don't see rules as sacred. We see them as tools. When the tools work, we use them. When they don't, we find better tools. Like genocide? I asked, my tentacles curling in disgust. Like making examples, he replied, unperturbed. The Krivak are gone. How many other species are now reconsidering their aggressive impulses? How many raids and border skirmishes have occurred in Union space since our response? None. We created peace through decisive action where your protocols failed for centuries. I couldn't argue with the facts. Pirate activity had ceased entirely. Border disputes had been rapidly settled through diplomatic channels. Species that had been at each other's throats for generations were suddenly finding common ground. All because they were terrified of attracting humanity's attention. You have created peace through fear, I said. Would you prefer war through politeness? Asked Reeves. The outcome matters more than the method, Ambassador. Before I could respond, my communication device chimed urgently. A priority message from the— Excuse me, I said to the humans, stepping away to view the message. What I read sent cold dread through all four of my hearts. Is something wrong, Ambassador? Asked Parker, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. I looked up at the three humans, wondering if they could possibly understand the horror of what was happening. The Threll Concordat has just seized 3 Union mining outposts in the Cygnus sector, I said. They are holding the personnel hostage and demanding territorial concessions. The Threll? Lo frowned. I'm not familiar with them. A militaristic empire beyond the Union's galactic south, I explained, still processing the implications. They have been isolationist for centuries. This is completely unexpected. Is it? Parker's voice was soft but pointed. Or is it a test? The realization hit me like a gravity wave. They are testing whether humans will respond to attacks on Union worlds the same way we respond to attacks on human worlds. Parker nodded slowly. That would be my assessment. But why? I asked, genuinely confused. Why risk extinction to test a theory? Because, if we don't respond, said Reeves grimly, they have just identified a weakness in humanity's security umbrella. They can attack Union worlds with impunity as long as they don't touch human settlements. And if you do respond, I asked, already dreading the answer. Then another species learns why humanity refused to kneel, said Lo, and that terrifying smile was back. The hard way. The next 12 hours were chaos. The Security Council convened in emergency session. The Threll ambassador, a hulking, four-armed being with chitinous armor and compound eyes, delivered his government's demands with smug confidence. The territories in question have always been part of the Threll ancestral domain, he declared. We are simply reclaiming what is ours. The mining personnel will be released unharmed once Union forces withdraw completely from the sector. And the 346 Union citizens currently being held? Asked Vex, his coloration fluctuating rapidly. Will be treated according to Threll military protocols, the ambassador replied dismissively, which is to say they will survive if they cooperate. Throughout this exchange, the human delegation sat silently, observing. They had no voting rights, no official standing in the council. Yet every eye, stalk, and sensory appendage in the chamber kept darting toward them, waiting for their reaction. It came not from the council floor, but from Earth directly. As the debate raged about potential responses, diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, limited military action, a human diplomatic courier entered the chamber and delivered a sealed message to Ambassador Parker. She read it, nodded once, and then requested permission to address the council. Earth has been monitoring the situation, she began when recognized. We have concluded that the Threll action constitutes an unprovoked attack on Galactic Union citizens and territory. The chamber went completely silent. While humanity has no formal defensive pact with the Union at present, we consider this action a direct challenge to the principles of peaceful coexistence that the Union represents, principles we have stated our intention to uphold. She paused, looking directly at the Threll ambassador. The government of Earth hereby issues the following statement. The Threll Concordat will release all hostages and withdraw from occupied territories within 1 standard day or face the full military response of humanity. There will be no further warnings. The Threll ambassador chittered, their species equivalent of laughter. Humanity has no jurisdiction here. This is a matter between the Concordat and the Union. Perhaps I wasn't clear, Parker said, her voice unnervingly calm. This isn't a negotiation, it's notification of consequences. You would go to war over mining outposts that don't even belong to your species? The Threll asked incredulously. We would go to war over the principle, replied Parker. Attack one peaceful civilization, you attack all of them. The Union has not requested your intervention, the Threll ambassador pointed out. You have no authority. We don't need authority, interrupted Lowe, speaking for the first time. We have ships. The Threll ambassador stormed out shortly after, transmitting humanity's ultimatum to his government. The council erupted into frantic debate, not about how to respond to the Threll, but about how to respond to humanity's unilateral declaration. They can't just appoint themselves the galaxy's police force, argued the Zentari defense minister. This sets a dangerous precedent. Would you prefer the Threll keep our people as hostages? Countered Greka the Gorvan. The humans are offering to solve a problem we have failed to address for centuries. At what cost? Asked Tekla of the Alari. Will they exterminate the Threll as they did the Kreejak? That depends entirely on the Threll, said Admiral Reeves calmly. As the arguments continued, I found myself torn. The xenoanthropologist in me was fascinated by humanity's behavior, the way they had seamlessly moved from demonstrating their power through destruction to demonstrating it through protection. The citizen of the Union in me was terrified of where this would lead. They are going to do it regardless of what we decide, aren't they? I asked Vex quietly as the council session adjourned for private deliberations. Yes, he replied, his color a resigned purple. The question is whether we condemn their action or accept their help. It's not help if we didn't ask for it, I pointed out. Tell that to the 346 hostages, he countered. The Threll response came 8 hours later. Not surrender, as many had expected, but defiance. They executed 10 hostages and transmitted the footage to the council with a message. Neither the Union nor humanity dictates terms to the Threll Concord. Within minutes, the human delegation departed without explanation. 2 hours later, reports began flooding in from the border regions. Human warships, dozens of them, were moving toward Threll space at maximum velocity. Once again, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do. This time, however, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't attack. At least, not in any way we could detect. No weapons were fired, no planets bombarded, no fleets engaged. The human ships simply took up positions at the edge of Threll territory and waited. For 3 days, nothing seemed to happen. The Threll issued boasts and threats. The council debated endlessly about jurisdiction and authority. The hostages remained captive. And then on the 4th day, something remarkable occurred. The Threll Concordat collapsed from within. It began with reports of communication disruptions throughout their territory. Then transportation systems failed. Food distribution networks broke down. And finally, incredibly, the Threll government itself fractured. Different factions suddenly at each other's throats, accusing each other of corruption, incompetence, and treason. Within 72 hours, the once unified Concordat had dissolved into civil war. The mining outposts, were abandoned as Threll forces rushed home to protect their own interests. The hostages were recovered by Union vessels without firing a shot, and humanity's fleet simply watched from the borders, never entering Threll space, never engaging directly. When Admiral Reeves returned to the council chamber a week later, the question on everyone's mind was obvious. "What did you do to them?" asked Tekla, not bothering with diplomatic niceties. Reeves smiled, that unsettling human expression. "We introduced them to information warfare." "Explain," demanded Ziral of the Thraxi. The Threll Concordat was already fragile, a forced unification of rival factions held together by a repressive central authority, Reeves said. "We simply shared certain truths with key individuals. Communications records, financial transactions, secret agreements, things the factions were hiding from each other." "You caused a civil war without firing a shot," said Grak of the Gorvin, sounding impressed despite himself. "We presented facts and allowed the Threll to make their own decisions." Reeves corrected. "That those decisions led to conflict among themselves rather than with us was their choice." "You manipulated them into self-destruction," I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Reeves looked at me directly. "We offered them the same choice we offer everyone, Ambassador. Peace or consequences. They chose consequences. We simply delivered them in the most efficient manner possible. Without genocide this time," noted Vex, his tone suggesting he considered this progress. "Different threats required different responses," said Reeves with a shrug. "The Krijak were unified by biology, a hive mind that couldn't be divided. Threll were unified by politics, a much more fragile arrangement. As the Council processed this latest demonstration of human power, I found myself more confused than ever. Just when I thought I understood their patterns, they changed the game entirely. "I need to speak with you," I said to Parker after the session, catching her in the corridor. "Privately." She nodded, following me to one of the small meditation chambers designed for species that required periodic isolation. "I don't understand your species," I admitted once we were alone. "First you destroy the Krishikak completely, then you break the Threll without killing them. Where is the consistency?" Parker regarded me thoughtfully. "The consistency is in the outcome, Ambassador. Both threats were eliminated with maximum efficiency and minimum risk to our forces. But the methods were completely different." "Because the situations were completely different," she replied, "we adapt. That's what humans do best. We assess each threat on its own terms and respond accordingly." "And who decides what response is appropriate?" I asked. "Who draws the line between diplomacy, manipulation, and genocide?" "Our leaders, advised by our best military and scientific minds," she said, "just like any other species. Except your decisions affect the entire galaxy now," I pointed out. "You have appointed yourselves our protectors without asking if we want your protection." Something changed in her expression, then a softening, perhaps even a hint of understanding. "You think we want this responsibility?" she said quietly. "You think we are eager to be the galaxy's enforcers? Aren't you?" I challenged. "You seem to have planned for it meticulously." She sighed, a human expression of resignation or frustration. "What we want, Ambassador Telor, is to explore the stars, to trade, to learn, to grow. What we have been forced to become is what the galaxy has made us." "No one forced you to commit genocide," I said flatly. "No?" She raised an eyebrow. "From the moment we achieved faster-than-light travel, how has the galaxy treated humanity? The Drekken attempted to enslave our colonies. The Kruthak murdered our children. 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 The Kruthak destroyed an entire research outpost. Each time we escalated our response because each time the message wasn't received." "What message?" "Leave us alone." She emphasized each word separately. "We don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to police it. We just want to exist without constantly fighting for our survival." "Then why offer protection to the Union? Why intervene with the Threll?" "Because we have learned that isolation isn't an option," she replied. "Because powers like the Krijak and the Threll won't simply leave us alone if we leave them alone. Because the only path to peace is to make the cost of war unthinkable." I studied her, trying to determine if she truly believed what she was saying. "My species can detect subtle biochemical signals that indicate deception, but humans were notoriously difficult to read." "You genuinely believe you are creating peace?" I said finally. We are creating peace, she insisted. Look at the data, Ambassador. Piracy is down 97%. Border conflicts have decreased by 84%. Species that have warred for generations are signing treaties. Out of fear of humanity, I countered. Out of recognition that cooperation is more beneficial than conflict, she corrected. Does it matter why peace exists? As long as it exists. It matters if that peace is built on terror, I said. It matters if species are simply biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to strike when humanity isn't looking. Parker smiled, then not the diplomatic smile I'd seen before, but something smaller, sadder. That's why we can never let our guard down. That's the burden we have accepted. As I left that meeting, I found myself more troubled than ever. If Parker was to be believed, humanity saw itself not as conquerors but as reluctant guardians, forced into a role they never wanted but now embraced as necessary. Could it be true? Or was it simply the most sophisticated justification for empire building the galaxy had ever seen? Over the following months, the pattern continued. Another attack on Union interests, this time by the Boreal hegemony attempting to seize a wormhole stabilization facility. Another human response, precision strikes against military targets only, forcing surrender within days. No civilian casualties, no planetary destruction, proportional force applied with surgical precision. The Security Council, after much debate, formally accepted humanity's membership. The proposed defensive pact was ratified by a narrow margin. Human warships began regular patrols of Union space, particularly in the troubled border regions, and peace, real measurable peace, began to spread across the galaxy for the first time in recorded history. 6 standard months after the Krishak extinction, I published my comprehensive analysis of human behavior titled The Paradox of Human Peace. Violence as Deterrence in Galactic Diplomacy. It became the most read xenoanthropological study in Union history. Its conclusion was simple, if disturbing. Humanity had indeed refused to kneel, but in doing so they had forced the galaxy to change its posture instead. Not to kneel exactly, but to stand more upright, to behave more honorably, to respect boundaries more carefully. At the formal ceremony marking Earth's acceptance into the Galactic Security Council, I found myself standing next to Commander Lowe at the reception afterward. I read your paper, he said, sipping what I recognized as human alcohol, that recreational neurotoxin they somehow enjoyed. It was surprisingly insightful for someone not of our species. Thank you, I think, I replied, uncertain if it was a compliment or condescension. One thing you got wrong, though, he continued. You suggested we see ourselves as reluctant guardians of galactic peace. Isn't that how Ambassador Parker described your role? He smiled, that predatory expression that still sent shivers through my neural network. Parker is a diplomat. Her job is to make our actions palatable to other species. He looked around the Grand Chamber at the hundreds of representatives from throughout the Union. The truth is both simpler and more complex. We are not guardians. We are survivors. Survivors, I repeated, confused. Humanity spent thousands of years trying to destroy itself on Earth, he said quietly. We fought over territory, resources, ideology, religion, sometimes just for the sake of fighting. We nearly succeeded in wiping ourselves out multiple times. Then how did you achieve peace? I asked, genuinely curious. We didn't, he replied, and there was no smile now. We just expanded the battlefield. We took our conflicts, our fears, our determination to survive, and we brought them to the stars. The only difference is that now, instead of fighting each other, we fight anyone who threatens us. That's horrifying, I said. That's human, he corrected. We refuse to kneel to each other. We certainly won't kneel to anyone else. And if the price of our continued existence is becoming the thing other species fear most, he shrugged, it's a price we are willing to pay. As he walked away, I stood alone, watching the representatives of 342 spacefaring civilizations mingle peacefully under the protective shadow of the most violent species the galaxy had ever known. Humanity had refused to kneel, and the galaxy had paid the price. The price of peace.